Welcome to Wellbeing with Manny in Conversation With. What we hear and listen to throughout our day can shape how we feel. If we feed and nourish our soul with wholesome conversations from everyday people, filled with positive stories, we may feel less alone and even inspired. We're all working through our own stuff, and sometimes you need to hear that you are doing amazing, which you are. Wellbeing with Manny in Conversation With is listening to others talk about how they have journeyed life so far, how they keep their wellbeing in check, and how they keep their mindset positive. This is not always possible, but sometimes they share some really good tips on how they improve their wellbeing just for those days when they're not feeling quite the ticket. Welcome to this Wellbeing with Manny in Conversation With community. I really just wanted to build something special that people can feel part of, feel seen, and feel valued. Some of the people we speak to have really inspirational stories, and hopefully it can resonate with you, make you stop, reflect, and also just pick up some top tips along the way. So thank you again for being here, and thanks for sharing your time with us. Here's the show. Hi everyone, just jumping in to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this series of Wellbeing with Manny in Conversation With, and that's the amazing IA Hair and Beauty. Now, I don't know about you, but as someone who has a very busy life with lots going on, an hour hair or beauty appointment can feel like a real treat, an absolute essential, non-negotiable bit of self-care. Sometimes I know that all I need is a fresh French manicure to make me feel a bit brighter. I don't think we should underestimate these little acts of kindness and the impact that they have in our busy lives. So we have a special treat for you, a 15% one-time code across all the IA Hair and Beauty range. So if that's a gel polish or beautiful nail art, and you just need to jump over to Instagram to see the amazing nail art that Isabel does, or a fresh new trim or colour, then IA Hair and Beauty is the best. Go to IA Hair and Beauty on Instagram or Facebook and DM Isabel quoting the podcast for your 15% off treat. Enjoy! Welcome back to Wellbeing with Manny in Conversation With
the Fresh Minds podcast with Veale.
This is very, very exciting. So we are doing a cross podcast collaboration. It's my first. Is it yours, Anna?
Yeah, it is. And I'm really excited to be here. It's going to be good fun.
It really, really is. So, this is really exciting for us, an absolute first for both of us. And I hope you really, really enjoy this because, we've made a very, very special connection, which we'll explain to you as time goes on. But in keeping with my podcast, I asked Anna if it was okay to start with the question that I always start with, which is, what does well-being mean to you?
Well, that is a very good question, which I'm going to throw back to you any second now. But well-being to me means living a life that's true to you. So I see so many people on the hamster wheel of life, kind of just going through the motions, really, and it affects their mental and physical well-being. So if they can get clear on what they actually want out of their life, that gives them a lot of direction, and they're able then to make choices that align with those values. So I guess well-being is going within and trusting your own self and taking action that aligns with your values.
Yeah, I love that.
So, and I'm going to throw it straight back to you now. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, quite similar in terms of values. But for me, as soon as I say, like, what does well-being mean to you? For me, the word balance is like top of the tree for me. So everything in balance. And I suppose that can mean different things to different people. So for me, it means making sure I have a balance of family life, work life, being out in nature life, which is something that I really kind of need for myself. And then something that I'm getting better at, which is tipping the balance of shifting my priorities, I guess, to put myself nearer the top of the list. I think it's something that I struggle with. I think it's probably something that a lot of people struggle with, to try and shift that focus to make sure that they are, fulfilled and energized to be able to care for those around them. So for me, well-being is making sure everything is balanced, and aligning with what you want to do in life, which obviously goes back to what you said about your values. If you're currently living a life where it doesn't align with your values, then it does kind of feel jarring. Whereas if everything kind of feeds back to your main core values, then it feels like you're living a life of purpose and a life towards being happy and therefore feeling balanced.
Love it. I don't know if you've heard of Ayurveda, the ancient Indian science of life, but it's all about balance, and they bring in the elements, and everybody has their own constitution based on those elements. And they believe that anything physical and emotional actually is because the body is out of balance. So yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful definition, and something that the Ayurvedic masters would agree with you as well.
Well, who knew how wise I was.
Exactly, a wise old sage.
So I guess what we should really do is, so for people who are avid listeners of our own podcast, it'd be really nice to introduce ourselves for those that are maybe listening for the first time and knowing who we are, and then maybe we could talk about how we met. So Anna, do you want to introduce kind of who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a mindset coach, specialising in men's mental fitness, and that came off the back of 20 years in the personal training and sports massage space, where the majority of my clients were males, and I saw the same themes coming through time and time again. And I just witnessed the pressures that they were under, and how we still, although we've made such advances in so many areas with technology and science, there's still a real stoicism around men and their she'll be right attitude, or I live in New Zealand, so she'll be right is a sort of a catchphrase that they tend to use, but in England that sort of stiff upper lip, and taking things very internally, and not kind of talking about things so that it's out in the open and then they can move forward. They tend to bottle things up quite a bit. So about 4 years ago, I transitioned into the coaching space and specialising in the men's mental fitness side. And it's absolutely brilliant because I bring my experience of the personal training, so the physical element, into the coaching, and also some breath work as well. So it's not just about kind of guys having to come and talk, which often they feel sort of quite uncomfortable. We kind of use different tools to be able to get the same results, which essentially is them getting really dialed down on what's important and then working towards that, and like you say, getting a balance in their life rather than it being one-dimensional.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Love that. Yeah, and for me, yeah, crossing over to people who don't know me over in your space. So my background is actually in the arts. So I trained as a musical theatre performer, voiceover artist, and that's what I've done for the majority of my life. And I'm a singing teacher and a vocal coach, and I do a lot of freelance vocal coaching around the UK. And over the years that I've been teaching, I've just seen such a shift in that very personal way that performers put themselves in front of people, and more often than not get rejections. Is part of the career. Being good at auditioning is kind of the career, and getting the job is kind of the cherry on the cake, because you have to get through that first door to get to the stage, to get to the screen, to get where you want to be. And just maybe over the past 5 or 6 years, some of the young people that I teach, certainly in institutions, have just felt the real pressures of being able to stand up in front of people with confidence, feel like they are worthy of being in that space, understanding about what they have to offer uniquely as a performer. And the whole thing just seemed completely and utterly wrapped up in their own kind of self-worth. And if one little note in a full song didn't go well, it was, I'm rubbish. that was kind of the overriding script of it, and that just kind of crept in over and over again. And there's lots of examples of that. And then of course when as new cohorts that I was teaching came in, it became more obvious that they needed to talk more. And I kind of, along with a lot of my colleagues, became a bit of a coach really, or in some cases an untrained counselor, which obviously I had to know my boundaries and when I needed to flag something up. But just to be an ear for someone to talk to is obviously great and fine, and really what we're all here to talk about. And I actually loved it. I loved being able to be that person that was able to just ask questions. So someone would say, I'm feeling such, and then coming back and where do we think that comes from? What's making you feel like that today? How did you feel yesterday? What's all of these questions that is so rooted in coaching, of how to kind of draw the answers out of that person. And just looking after people has felt like something that I've always done. So it just felt really natural when lockdown happened and we all had a little bit of time to reflect. I then retrained as a wellbeing coach, and since that point I've just wanted to have conversations. So my main theme is really supporting those that are in the arts, but really anybody can listen to the podcast and watch on YouTube. I also pop the videos on YouTube. So that just people can feel that they're part of something. They feel seen, they feel valued, they listen to conversations that nourish their soul. And that's really part of a self-care routine for someone, going for a walk and listening to a podcast. And I'd been listening to podcasts for so long, I just wanted to become part of that space. So that was my journey into it.
Well, I'm really glad that you have, because I loved listening to your very first podcast, and I would encourage anybody to do that. And actually, it was great because I was actually walking the dog when I was listening to it, and just the way, I won't give too much away, but just there was one part that really resonated with me. And at that point, I was sort of struggling with my son, who loves his PlayStation, and your guest was brilliant about saying how he'd used gaming as a way to let go of his day. And it was just a reframe that I hadn't thought of. When you're stuck in the parenting rut, you only see a child kind of playing on a PlayStation and you think that their brain is just turning to mush. But to hear somebody's reframe on it enabled me to have that conversation with my son. He was like, yeah, Mum, it's like, for that moment that I'm there, I'm not thinking about school, I'm not thinking about football, I'm just in the moment. So it was great. It was great. And that was just by listening to the podcast on a dog walk. So thank you for sharing your amazing guests with the world, because it's brilliant. And those little golden nuggets are just spaced out in conversations with everyday people. Hey.
Yeah, well, thank you. And same with you. You in your description, what I love is that you talk to ordinary people about doing extraordinary things. And as I've said to you before, my favorite episode of yours is with the wonderful Henry Fraser, who just, his story, again, not giving anything away to anyone, but you just have to go and find that on the Fresh Minds podcast. Just when you're feeling like you're not quite sure how to build your resilience, then if you listen to that inspirational guy, then again, you'll gain so much from that in terms of how you reframe your life, pick things up and move on and live the best life that you possibly can. So it's amazing that there's so much out there for us to be able to talk about and share. So I guess we need to perhaps talk about how we met.
Yes, well, this is a very exciting point for us. Do you want to start or shall I go?
No, go, you go.
Oh, well, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure you do, but Manny was on the incredible High Performance podcast. And at the end, Jake Humphrey and Damien, they do like an interview with some of the people, some of the listeners. And I was so inspired by Manny's interview that I was like, I've got to just get in touch with this girl. So out of nowhere, I kind of stalked her, sent her an email saying, look, I live on the complete other side of the world from you, but I just loved the way you came across on your podcast. I think our personalities align, and it's always good to get to know new people doing similar sorts of things. So do you want to connect? And she replied. I went to bed and the next morning there it was in my inbox, and I don't know, it's just been a really lovely relationship, organic relationship that had no expectation of where it would go beyond, well, she sounds like a cool chick and she's doing some cool things, let's see if we can connect. And here we are doing a podcast together. It's epic.
Yeah, it's amazing. And back at you, just it was only a few lines and I read it and just thought, oh my God, this person is definitely part of my tribe. I'm just getting in there. And you can tell, can't you? Like we were talking before about connection, and I suppose it leads us really nicely into talking about how important connections really are. And you mentioned something before which really resonated with me, which was that especially during lockdown, during the pandemic that we've all been through, and for so many people, and well, I suppose the whole world is still navigating to a certain extent, and we're all thinking of everybody out there who is still battling with any difficulties that's left you with. Just that connection, the closeness that we felt, or some of us felt, I mean, I'm generalizing here, to our community, and what some of us maybe tried to cultivate. I don't know if you want to pick up on that.
Yeah, well, I guess for me, I live in New Zealand, and the culture here is very different to that in the UK, in that there's probably still more of the neighborly community. And like I said, I'm generalizing more. I lived in a reasonably big city back in the UK, so unless you went out of your way to get to know the people that you live next door to, it was unlikely that you're going to see them because people are working all the time and different hours of the day and things like that. But one thing I did notice is like how down people got because they couldn't be around other people, and that sent a huge message to me. And I guess personally, being on the other side of the world from all the people that I love, minus my family and friends here, that has been taken a massive toll on my own mental and physical health. Not being able to just jump back on a plane. When we moved over here, my mentality was, well, I'm only a plane ride away, and COVID proved that you're absolutely not. And even now, the restrictions have been lifted, you're looking at double the airfare to get home. So again, it's not just I'll just put a few dollars aside and jump on a plane. It's okay, I've got to work really, really hard just to get one of us back into the country. And again, that sort of the perception that you can't be with the people that you love is even that can be really anxiety inducing. And so, I mean, for us as a country, we were looking at England and countries like England who were in constant lockdown and thinking, how on earth are you coping? Because all of a sudden you're not able to have physical touch with the people that you love. You're not able to do the things that you take for granted. And from what I hear, there was that element of fear when you were around people for a little while. And what did that look like? Am I allowed to cuddle you? Am I allowed to shake your hand? Oh my goodness, I sneezed and I forgot to get my elbow up. All of these things that we completely took for granted. And I just think out of all of the well-being components, one of the things that gets missed out is that power of connection and power of community. And if we get back to that, even in parenting, I have a baby, I get sent home 2 days later, and no, the message is you do it on your own, you can cope. And not only can you cope as a female, you've got to get your body back, and you've got to have an entrepreneurial business, and you've got to put it all on social media, and breastfeed till they're 10, and have your hair looking amazing. And there's just all these pressures coming at you from every which angle. But back in the day, that didn't happen. We'd have a baby and we'd have the aunties and the grandparents, and there was this nurturing phase. And I want us to be able to get back to that in our own way, in our own kind of whatever way. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, completely the same as you. I think, lockdown was the toughest time for so many people. And kind of firsthand here, obviously it's nothing like being, over the other side of the world from your family, but even just our experience of having Kev's nan lives, just 5 minutes walk down the road, and has lived on her own for, over 20 years. And just going and standing at her gate and seeing her in her house on her own was just heartbreaking. And she was only there at the gate. You'd have killed to see family and friends at a gate. I appreciate the difference there.
No, it's all relative. It really is, because in a way that's even harder, because you're there but you're not there,
Yeah. And
so
that was
it's relative.
hard. Yeah, that was hard. And we ended up, we had our dog then. Obviously we don't have him now, but we had our dog then, and we would open the gate and let him go in, and not really understanding the science behind whether dogs were okay or could even carry it, so that she had someone to cuddle for a moment. So she would kind of have a little stroke and a cuddle with Max, and he'd be quite happy to sit there as an old lab. And that was really, really hard. I remember driving over to Leeds when the kind of rule of 6. I don't know what you heard about that over in New Zealand, but we had this thing called the rule of 6, which was just weird. The whole rules of it were weird. We won't go into that. But we had this thing coming called the rule of 6, and it was 6 people could meet outside. This was a few kind of months after things lifted a little bit. Originally, it was only you could meet one friend for a walk, or you could only go out with people who lived in your household. It was really, really tough. But when you could meet 6 people outside, we drove over to my mum and dad's in Leeds, and they live in a flat. So there was nowhere for us really to go, and it was pouring down with rain. And my mum and dad at the back of their flats have a row of garages. So my dad opened the garage, took his car out, parked it kind of a little bit away, and he just put some deck chairs, because you weren't allowed inside. And I think, me, along with so many other people, the less said about the rules, the better in this country. But, us as a family always played by the rules. And so we sat, half in, half out of this garage, making sure we weren't getting soaked, just so that we could sit with them in the freezing cold and the rain. And that was kind of that was most people's story, and people really, really missed it. Thank goodness for the technology we have, I guess, to being able to FaceTime and stuff. But obviously, with Kev's nan, we couldn't do that. I remember going into her house when things lifted a bit, and you could mix, I think, 2 households, and you could have somebody in what was called bubble back then. Gosh, all these terms are going to be so weird. When we listen back to this in 5 years, we're going to be like, so, I went...
She was in a bubble.
Yeah, she was in it, but she was what? Like Glinda flying across the stage in Wicked. So I went into her house, like washed my hands as soon as I got there, wore my mask, and set an iPad up so that when we FaceTimed people from our family, so that she could see everyone.
What a good idea.
Yeah, that was, you could see her face just completely and utterly changed. So that human connection is everything for me. And I've probably said it before on one of my podcasts, that you feel so lifted after you've had a conversation, a connection with someone. And, even if it's just, yesterday I was in a meeting all day with people I haven't really been in a room with for a couple of years. And I was like a child. I was like, hello, just so nice to see people. And somebody put a hand on my arm, and I felt this rush of like warmth through my body, because that's, as humans, that's what we crave, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what blew my mind was going back to see my mum after 2 years. Now, my mum and I are like thick as thieves. We're best of friends. The last time I saw her, we went to Corfu together, and I literally flew back for 8 days. And I arrived, we jumped on a plane, we had a mad week in Corfu, and she was getting me driving up the tiny cliffs, and I thought I'm rubbish at driving. I thought I was gonna, that was gonna be the end of us falling off this massive cliff into the ocean. And we had the most incredible time. And then the plan for the following year was for us to go to Ireland. And it was just like, okay, brilliant. And then of course COVID hit. Everybody has their own story as to what that happened, but it meant that it was 2.5 years before I saw her again. And she's 86 next week. So that in that sort of age, it's quite a big chunk of time not to see someone. And she'd been really poorly. One of my brothers lives in France, the other one lives about 4 hours away from her. And so she hasn't seen us, well, certainly hadn't seen the two of us who live away. And just before I arrived, she'd seen my brother from France, and then she had a month with me. And she'd been really poorly for 6 months before, and to the point where you're kind of like, okay, what's going to happen? Her quality of life looks like it might change. And then I came back, and she's just had this whole new lease of life. And both of us agree that it's the energy that her children, all three of us were there, and I kind of missed out on my brother from a week, I think, but within the space of 6 weeks, she got to see all three of her children and have that and for me, she had me for a month, and I didn't have my children or my husband, so I literally was there every day. And I'd make cups of tea, I'd make her lunch, we'd sit down and watch our favorite TV program together, and it was that complete unity. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that her health has improved as a result of that lift of having the people that she loves the most around her. Yes. And if I think about it too much, it kind of breaks my heart, because why am I living so far away? But equally, it makes me more and more determined for people to understand that we can go on and eat our 8 bits of fruit and vegetables, and we can go for our walks, and we can do all the things, but if you're not connecting with the people that you love, and you're not actually there, I mean, yes, technology is amazing, but you're not putting the actual physical time in with people, then you're missing out on a massive chunk of well-being. And that's kind of where I'm on a bit of a mission for people to just slow down and actually see that there's these quantum moments every day with beautiful human beings that want to be with you, they want to connect, yet we're often too busy in our head thinking, I've got to get to the grocery store, I've got to get the washing up done, and we miss those moments, and then they're gone. So I feel like connection is probably one of my biggest drivers for people to understand that well-being piece.
Amazing. Yeah, totally understood. And I'm so happy to hear that about your mum as well. That really is beautiful news. Yeah, love it. Hi, Mum.
Hi, Mum.
One of the things that I'd love to ask you as well is about the space that you occupy within men's mental health. I think that's a really for me that resonates a lot. Men's mental health means so much to me for parts of my story, which I'm sure we might uncover at some parts of this, and maybe just to chat through why that space, and what's it all for you.
Yeah, it's definitely a loaded question, but I guess sort of like we may as well just go straight into it.
Yeah, I mean, come on, big questions. Here we are.
Absolutely. I was blessed to have a dad that was he was an amazing human being. He was one of those souls that as soon as he walked into the room, you just felt like all eyes were on you. He made every person in that room feel the same. He had this just incredible energy about him, and he was generous, he was funny, he was kind, he had all of the things, but he had his demons, and he used to drown them in drink and alcohol. And although he was an incredible human, and I was very lucky to have him in my world, he died about 8 years ago, and I know that he died with regret. And you would get glimmers of it after his drinking spells, and he would sort of go there in his head, and he'd talk about some stuff, and then he'd just come back to the present moment. And for me, his passing was huge. We were best friends. My mum, my dad, and myself, we had quite a unique relationship. I was the only child of their relationship, and we had siblings on either side, and we're all very close as a family. But growing up, often it was just the three of us, so we had quite a unique relationship. And when he died, which was really quite suddenly, this kind of unfillable gap has been there ever since. And it kind of became my mission to inspire, is probably the wrong word because it's overused, but inspire people to make choices that fully align with their core being, their values, so that when they go to their deathbed, they've kind of pretty much done and been the person that they wanted to be, rather than kind of going, I wish I had done this, but I didn't do it because I was scared, or I felt I couldn't. And so for me, I feel the females, we kind of, as much as we're tapped out and we've got our own pressures, we're pretty well catered for, to be honest. You know, you only have to scroll down your Facebook feed to see the help that females can get. There's not much out there for men, if I'm honest. And I love it because I bridge the gap between where they want to be and where they are now. And being a female is absolutely brilliant because I bring a different dynamic, a different energy to it. And I guess because I've worked in male orientated sports arenas for the last 20 years, I've worked with professional rugby players, professional footballers, rowers. I just seem to kind of lean more towards that kind of masculine energy. I'm perfectly placed to kind of go into that space. So yeah, it's brilliant. It's challenging. It brings its challenges. One, because men, they don't feel like they need any help until often it's at that breaking point, that kind of burnout. They maybe make choices that they shouldn't be making, you know, or I say shouldn't be making, but you know, marriages end or affairs happen, or they leave their job spontaneously, or they do something to combust their so-called perfect life. So my role as a coach is to get there first. So get to that point where they can see that they're not in balance, and they know that they need to make changes, but it's not so drastic that they have to go down to that sort of kind of next level with more support with psychologists and counsellors. So the coaching is very forward focused, it's very action driven, and it's motivating for them. And I guess the biggest piece of the puzzle, which often goes unnoticed, is that accountability piece. And as soon as they've got accountability, they've got that role and they create the momentum. Once they create momentum, they then sort of are able to kind of unravel the habitual thought patterns that are creating sort of damaging relationships to themselves and others. And then they can rewire and restructure, and then they're away laughing. So yeah, that's kind of what took me into the space. And yeah, it seems to be going pretty well so far. But what about you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for sharing that with us, because that's, you know, like you say, it's a big topic for you and it means so much, but you are undoubtedly making such a huge difference to so many people's lives, and it's so important. And one of the reasons that I said that it aligned so much with me and resonated with me so much, and I said this to you last time we had a chat, that I probably haven't said it out loud enough, that I think one of the reasons that I transitioned into the wellbeing world was probably from being in my late teens, when I lost one of my very, very, very close friends. He died by suicide. And I think that kind of feeling of not being able to help and not feeling like, was there something more I could have done? And when I look back on that time, you know, we're talking, I'm 41, you know, we were 17. It was, you know, he was 17. Some of us were 18, actually. It wasn't talked about. We didn't understand it. There wasn't the understanding that we have now about it. And there was, you know, supports were happening, but clearly there was so much more going on. And I think if I'd have known then what I know now, I always wonder, and maybe that's,
Yeah.
that carries with me, and it carries with a lot of us who were there at the time and experienced all that, which was really tough. But it's also not that I'm sure anything particularly positive can come out of that situation, but you have to look at it that it does. I feel much more hyper aware now of looking after people and understanding what's going on, and knowing when people become withdrawn, or especially with, a couple of my husband's friends. I've been like, have you checked in with them, because last time we saw them they said this and they said that, and it kind of, something comes up. So yeah, for me, there's a small portion of what I do that feels a little bit rooted in I need to do more, and I kind of am all right with that, actually. Part of me wonders whether, is that a decent driving force, is that okay? But I think it is, and I think the more I say that out loud, the more comfortable I become with it. I think it's just because I haven't said it enough.
Yeah,
But
and I think, also with that, it's, as long as it's for good, and as long as it's not, you're not demonizing yourself for something, then how can it not be a good driver for you? Because everything we experience, especially the really tough experiences, I can't imagine what that would have been like at the age of 18, 17, 18. But those experiences only shape us. And so if you weren't to do anything because you felt you shouldn't, then you're going to feel more out of alignment with your soul. So it's about just kind of, I guess, just checking in and kind of seeing where it aligns, and absolutely using it. And then you're using his name in honor to enrich the lives of others, which can only be a good thing.
yeah, thanks for that. That means a lot. And then I suppose further from that, just the level of it sounds weird, but the care and the nurture I feel in other people is really strong. And if I see other people who aren't feeling like they're getting the most out of their life, or they're just struggling with something, I instantly want to know if I can help. And I suppose that makes me a bit of a fixer. But again, I feel all right with that, because I do know in the end that I'm not going to be able to fix everyone. And that isn't really the job of what I'm doing anyway. It's just, I feel as if maybe I could just say something that might lift someone, support someone, make them feel seen and not alone. And so many of us say things daily that are just kind of throwaway, but actually throwaway things that we say to us can embed, especially if it's a particularly negative script that maybe we've said for many years, or just, the throwaway, things we carry with us from childhood. Actually, having someone
Yeah.
say, hang on a sec, actually, what I think is that you're actually incredible at that, and maybe you're just not seeing what I see. And that reframe and refocus, just chipping away at someone, can then make that negative script just kind of shrink a bit. And for me, that's really, really important. For me, it's being kinder to people in the world. And I've said things in the past and people have been like, really, is that how you feel? And it makes me feel like I'm the odd one out. If I see somebody struggling with something, I instantly want to go and help. There's something that I want to say, it affects me. I'm affected by something. Whereas some people can easily be like, it's just the way it is. And it's not, but it doesn't have to be the way it is. So I suppose that's where it all comes from. But I think having conversations that people listen to, knowing my journey with podcasts that I've listened to over the years, and I've probably been an avid podcast listener for about 6-7 years, I really feel like that's been part of what's shaped me, for sure. And just, knowing that darker periods of your life, they will and they may happen, and when they do happen, it is possible with the right support to get better and to learn how to manage them, especially if they're particularly heavy. That might be something that you manage for life, but seeing it for what it is and getting the right support is the most important thing. But even just people who are having, you know, a bit of a blue day, that's okay. It is absolutely okay. But knowing perhaps what works for you and making sure, again, it's that coming back to shift of priority, putting yourself back to the top of the list. If I'm not feeling okay today, but I'm absolutely riddled with things that I have to do, how is that balance going to stay? So yeah, that's kind of where I
Yeah.
don't know if I answered anything there that you asked me, but that came out.
Yeah, and that's lovely. And I mean, you've hit on a good point, and we've kind of mentioned it a couple of times, but the narrative that we have to put ourselves last, that's a strong belief to try and shift, male and female. And you know, I'm really aware of it being a parent. I'll ask my kids what they want to do, and my son especially, he's really can lean towards that people pleasing. And even just a couple of days ago, I was like, mate, if you're feeling tired and you don't want to go, you know, it's okay to say, I'm good. Of course, at that age, nearly 13, there's that kind of fear of missing out, but equally just giving that permission. And you know what? He chose not to go. And it was because he was tired. He's doing a lot of sport, and, you know, their bodies are growing. And in that moment, he didn't want to let the person down, but it's like, okay, so are you going to not let them down over letting yourself down? And if we can get the kids, the youngsters, to understand that that's not selfish, there's a big difference between being selfish and looking after yourself.
Yeah.
And if they can read the cues, then as adults, they're going to be able to set the boundaries a lot more, rather than us trying to for people to have to unlearn their habitual response to saying yes to things when they really mean no. So that's something as a mum I'm trying to do myself. And people pleaser. And I'll even I go the other way, in that I'll offer myself even more, even though I know I haven't got the capacity to do it. And people haven't even asked me, I'm offering it. And in my head, I'm going, stop, no, stop it. And I'm still going forward, going, oh yeah, that's fine, no worries.
Yeah.
You can take my car and my cash, and I'll just hang back here and I'll catch the bus. We're all right. So it's, you know, I think that's a really important point for both of our listeners to get is, you know, before you say yes to anything, just kind of go, I'll let you know tomorrow. Instead of this reactive response. And then it just creates that little bit of space. And let's be honest, in everything that we do, if we can create space, we're going to give ourselves at least the choice of a different outcome. But that coming back to self, and then it means if you're topped up and your tank's topped up, then you've got more to give. So you're not being selfish, because you've got more energy to give other people.
Yeah, I heard a brilliant thing the other day. I think it was from Jay Shetty, who we all love, of course, out there in the world. And it was I'm probably going to absolutely butcher it, but it's something like, you know, if somebody asks you at the end of a really long day, have you just got 10 more minutes, and you feel like your energy is like depleted, it's not even at 5%. There's nothing wrong with saying, do you know what? I have got 10 minutes, but I haven't actually got any more energy at the moment. So if we can maybe talk tomorrow or schedule a time, you know, when someone catches you offhand,
absolutely,
you know, schedule that time. You can have 100% of my energy and the time that we need. It's something like that anyway. And that makes sense, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. And again, kind of bringing it back to the kids, I do that with them. I'm like an energizer bunny. Like I go 100%, and then I've got nothing. Like there's nothing left. And I've taught myself over the years to kind of go, do you know what, kids, I've got that much left. And so if you want any food, if you want to ask me a question, if you want me to, like, I don't know, clean your school uniform, you've got like 5 minutes to because I'm running out of steam. And it's brilliant because everybody then knows where I'm at. And it's again, it's about kind of containing it and putting boundaries in. And people respect you more then, And it's something that I speak to my clients about. I often see business owners and they'll come in and they've got their phone and they'll go, oh, I've got to put it on silent. And more times than not, the silent will be on vibration. They'll stick it in their pocket and they'll be mid-conversation and then it will vibrate. And then they'll kind of, there's that microsecond where they've gone and then they come back and then it goes again. And this might go on 7, 8, 9 times, 10 times in a session. And they're never fully present, and that's really detrimental to the person that they're in front of. Now, the way I highlight it is if that's your child and or your wife or your partner that you're doing that to, immediately the person in front of you feels that they've lost your attention. And so wouldn't you rather just keep the phone in the car or keep the phone in a different area and be 100%, so you've got the energy for that person? And if you haven't got the energy for it, just don't pick up the phone. Because I don't know how many, I've kind of gone off on 2 different tangents there, but if we don't have the energy and we're constantly distracted by phones beeping or emails going off, notifications here, there and everywhere, we're just depleting our energy tank. But equally, when we're in that kind of moment of like, oh God, he's phoning me, we're immediately sending an energy to that person and we're not actually doing them any favors. And you've probably had it where, I don't know, one of your mates picks up the phone and they're like, oh look, I'm just in the middle of something, and you're like, well, in a way, don't pick up the phone. It's actually better to not pick up the phone than be like, hold on a minute, like, oh yeah. And again, it's habitual because we feel we should be answering this thing on the other line. But I know I kind of did 2 little conversations there in the end, but it all comes back down to the same thing. Our inability to be present creates this depletion in energy. And then if we haven't got the energy, we then, we're giving ourselves all the time.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree. I could not agree more. I'm terrible for it, to be honest. And the reason, just to kind of like balance that kind of thought process as well, is the reason that sometimes I pick up and say, gosh, I can't speak to you now, but I'll phone you later, is because I feel like I don't want them to feel like I've ignored them. So if I at least tell them that I'll speak to them later, it's fine. But now I kind of see that from another angle, that maybe that energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because I mean, I'm sitting here as if I don't ever do it. Like, I absolutely do. But I think that's something I strive towards, is that whoever I'm with needs to be the person I'm with. And I know I completely digressed from my main point, which at 9:45 at night I'll tend to do. But the point, that's the I think we are all just bombarded so much that we don't have the time. And I think Jay Shetty, brilliant piece of advice. Just I haven't got time for you at the moment, but when we do, it's going to be kick ass, happy days. Well, not even haven't got time for you, I haven't got the energy.
Absolutely. Just to kind of round it up, I know there's one of the things that we're both kind of chatting about before, which was about this living like the life that you want to lead. Like, this is something that we have talked about before, and it keeps kind of coming back to me, especially I use the phrase, purpose-driven life so much. And it's really nice that you kind of added in before about, and it's the life you want to lead, not the life that you think others need you to lead, and need you to lead. Sorry. And I think it's really interesting actually when you think about the kind of perhaps historical scripts that families can give you about certain paths that you go down. And certainly when I'm aligning it to the performance industry, like, the amount of anecdotal stories I've heard about, actors sitting in the back of a taxi and the taxi driver goes, oh, what do you do for a living? Like, and it's the worst thing to say, to go, I'm an actor. Oh, what have I seen you in? And you've probably been hustling and working for like 15 years, doing some cracking shows. Maybe you've gone to Edinburgh, you've done something down at the Southwark Playhouse. And potentially that taxi driver doesn't know that. He just kind of possibly wants to know if you've been in Corrie or EastEnders. Do you know what I mean? And there's that, that angle. But I'm just interested to know your kind of thoughts on that, and making sure that people are living the life they really want to lead?
Yeah, I think it's so hard, especially for performers as well, because like you say, there's such a backstory to what the end result is, like how they've had to hustle to get to that point, and to have the resilience and the capacity to keep going back again and again and again. Is testament to them choosing that as their craft for a start. But I don't know, I was very lucky in that I grew up with two parents who were like, you want to be that, go for it, but don't expect anyone to hold your hand through it. They were very real about I wanted to be a vet, and then I wanted to be a model, and then I wanted to be a firefighter, and then you name it, I threw it at them, and they said, yeah, go for it. But they also told me that if you're going to do that, you've got to work for it. And I think that although my parents were really good at leading me to kind of go for your dreams, I didn't have the self-belief to follow through on a lot of the things that I did. So I didn't actually find my passion and drive for life until I was in my mid-20s. A lot of my friends, they knew that they wanted to go to university and study this, they wanted to do this, they wanted to do that, but I had a really strong belief that I was a bit thick. So I reinforced that belief by failing all of my exams. So I went traveling at the age of 18. That was on my bucket list from the age of 14, I decided I was going to go traveling. But beyond going traveling to Australia, there wasn't really much of a game plan. And then all my friends had this kind of trajectory. And I just kind of kept falling into jobs until, I had a sort of a life-changing kind of period in my life, and in my 20s, where I was like, nah, this is where I'm going and this is what I'm going to do. And it's kind of led me to where I am now. But I think for me, the biggest thing is to, like, I don't know if I can swear, but like,
you can.
What anyone else thinks, like it's just so important. And we might get there too late. Sometimes people get there too late. I was really lucky enough to hold a workshop for gay pride a few weeks ago over here, and some of the stories that these guys were telling me were breaking my heart. Like, the family expectation of go to school, go to university, get a wife, get married, have children, get a wife, get married, have children. That was their trajectory. And they knew all along that there was something different, that they were longing for something different. And without kind of sharing too many sort of personal stories, but having the courage to be able to step out of that and go, I can't do it, I'm sorry, I can't live this lie, is so courageous. And obviously that's sort of one end of a spectrum, which is really, really so brave. I think to a certain degree, a lot of us just kind of do it on the superficial. They go into jobs that they don't particularly want, then they get the house that they have to then have the mortgage, so they've got to go to the job that they don't particularly like. Maybe they get talked into marrying someone when they didn't really want to get married. They're just doing it because if you don't, then you're the weirdo that doesn't get married. Like, oh, why didn't you do that? So I think just it's really important that we have these honest conversations. That why not? Like, why can't we be that? And I was lucky enough to grow up in an environment where my parents weren't married, and they told me to do whatever I wanted to do. So, but I was the minority. And so I think, one, we need to really dig deep and find out what it is we really, really want, and also what you really, really want.
Zigga.
Oh my gosh, my daughter's doing that for lip syncing on Tuesday. My gosh,
love it so much.
And also, like, are you leading like a habit-driven life? Are you actually leading a life that you think you want but you don't really, really want? And they're scary questions to have, because that's the time when people kind of go, oh no, I don't want to be in this relationship, or oh no, I don't want to be in this job. And that creates quite a few problems. Or opportunities, depending on how you look at it. But I think if we have these honest conversations, then people kind of go, do you know what, I did actually want to be a pilot, and well, maybe I can't be a pilot now, but what could I do to take me more towards that? Well, I could go and do simulation classes, or just lead you something. Living your purpose doesn't mean leaving your family and going off to India and being, a monk, which is what I'd quite like to do. But that's not realistic. I'm not going to do it. So I studied Ayurveda. So I studied Ayurveda, which brought me closer to my Indian dream. And if that's still a calling for me when the kids have grown up, happy days, I'll go and do that when they're older. And so it doesn't necessarily mean giving everything up, but it does mean really looking at what you want and being able to be brave enough to step out and start doing those things. Maybe you wanted to be a footballer and you couldn't, you went down the corporate path. Well, could you go into some community coaching? Maybe you wanted to be a hairdresser and that was your calling, but somebody told you that you were rubbish with scissors. I don't know, how else can you be creative? What are your thoughts on living purpose? I mean, living a purpose-living life, what does that mean to you, and how do you encourage the people that you encounter to do it?
I mean, I feel like there's a part of me that has never quite fulfilled what I want to do as a performer, and I think that's something that I've made a bit of peace with, because it felt I did some really great work, I did some lovely jobs, but there were a few jobs that eluded me, that are now kind of probably not going to happen. But I say that with a small opening of, but maybe it would. So that's not a closed door to me. And actually, I find so much purpose doing what I'm doing. And I love vocal coaching, and I love seeing, somebody get something and it means something to them, and it means that they feel more confident in that role or whatever they're doing. But I don't think I felt as much purpose as when I started doing the wellbeing work. So after I'd done my mental health first aid England and the wellbeing qualification, something changed. I'm not sure what it was, but something changed, and it felt like I've always had this weird thing, which I know is kind of nonsense, but that being a singing teacher doesn't change the world, which is really weird, because actually there are some conversations that I've had with my students that can be really impactful, but I've always felt like I'm not doing enough, which again is interesting to unpack at some point in the future.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to some more conversations with you.
Anna's making notes on what she has to get me to open up to.
Okay.
But yeah, this just feels like something that has, like, people from school who I've not seen for 20 odd years, maybe longer, saying, oh yeah, you were always going to do something like this. It's actually a really lovely thing to hear, because actually you go, well, yeah, maybe I have always been wanting, to care a bit more and to make change and to do something that one person goes, gosh, that conversation was great. I might just nick that and put that into my life. And that gives me all the purpose that I need. And just being able to, it's made me a better parent. Being able to just step back, like you were saying, step back and see what your kids really need, what they want, reframing things, taking my time. And, everybody listening to this, by no means do I always get it right. I very honestly shared with Anna before we started recording that, I haven't got this all worked out. I will have days where I'll spend, a little bit of time crying in front of the mirror before I go out because I can't stand the way I look. But again, that's all stuff that I am working on and I'm trying to be better at. But part of this journey takes me into a sense of calmer, more balance in my life, something that feels that's been out of whack for quite a while, I think. And so for me, I think the message to everyone is you really can do what you want to do. And that might be hard. It might be hard to do that in a work. It might be hard to figure it out. It might be hard to say to a family member who doesn't agree with a particular path that you're taking. You know, I know a lot of performers whose parents never wanted them to go into that profession because of the difficulties it can throw up, but it's also an amazing profession that people adore, that means a lot to people, that brings so much joy, and it's highly skilled. No matter what anybody says, it is highly skilled.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Work.
Yeah.
And actually, hard work, perseverance, really you can do it. You can do everything that you want to do. No one says that it's going to be easy, but nobody necessarily wants it to be easy. You know, if it was all really easy, there'd be no challenges, there'd be no learning, there'd be no failure, there'd be no developing, there'd be no growing. And that's what we yearn for. We yearn to, you know, for me, when I don't do something very well, I've learned to be like, okay, what do I learn from that? Failure, especially in your world, the sports world, failure is a learning opportunity always. It's harder, I think, for performers, you know, when we feel like we've failed in quotation marks, or we get a rejection, it's like, what's wrong with me? It goes deep to the core of who we are. But actually, that's not true, you know, and that's just a thought that you had in the moment, and it doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it fact. But what is true is that what can you learn from that? And what I learned back all those years ago is that I wasn't made of strong enough stuff back then to be able to keep doing it. But the industry is different now. The world is different now, and you know, that door is not forever closed. But it just had to close at that moment. And now it just feels like my life feels like it's where it should be.
Oh, and that's wonderful. And don't you find that you just evolve as well, you know, and you know, you evolve and grow, and so our thoughts around things are different, and so our reality starts to change and starts to take shape. I think that's the beautiful thing about this work. Once you start doing it, you kind of realize that, you know, the world is suffering everywhere, and it's essentially what we make things mean. Our perception is just that. It's our little dots, and we get so focused on what that means, when somebody else could kind of swoop in and go, that's not a dot, that's a star. You're like, oh, hold on a minute. You know, your whole perception changes. But unless you come at it with courage and, like you say, hard work, and I think the thing with performers is it's hard not to make it personal, because you are the product.
Yeah.
You know, if you're selling yoga mats, then if somebody doesn't like a yoga mat and you're selling it, you're like, oh, well, they just don't like the yoga mat. Whereas if you're selling yourself and you are the product, and they're saying, well, no, actually, sorry, not today, then unless you have got the skills and you've been taught the skills to be like, okay, well, you know, that was my product, it's not me as a human being, then of course you're going to take it personally. And so again, that applies to many people now going out into the entrepreneurial space, being able to create that distance between somebody saying, yes, I'll buy your coaching services, for example, or oh, actually no, it's not for me. There's so many other factors that are in play that we can't control, but because we're meaning making machines, we make it mean something about us, and generally speaking, it will hit the point that we've got that core belief in, isn't it? So I mean, I had it the other day with a group of teenagers. I was resorted to tears, which was ridiculous, but they were having a bit of banter, but my core belief was that I'm not good enough and I'm not intelligent enough, and they just happened to say the wrong thing, and it went straight down to that, like, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough. And luckily I was able to bring myself back. But we all have our Achilles heel, and if we're not aware of our Achilles heel, we can get triggered, and it can stop us from living a really, really awesome life.
Exactly.
So
I love
just
that.
get on and get doing the work, I say.
Absolutely. And always know that somebody not buying into something that you have to offer is nothing to do with your levels of, should be nothing to do with your levels of self-worth. You're worthy of everything. Well, that is
just as you are.
Just as you are, Anna.
You.
Well, do you know what? This has been the absolute best, and I guess we should call it to a close. And just to everybody who's listening, thank you so much for being part of it today, because this has been, a couple of gals, opposite sides of the world, having a really honest conversation that hopefully you'll be able to take something from. And just thank you so much for reaching out in that initial email, because this has been, this friendship is life enhancing for me. It's been really lovely.
Yeah, no, likewise, and thank you so much. I'm looking forward to continuing our friendship off air, and thanks to all the listeners. It's been brilliant and just great. This has been completely unscripted. We're just kind of going, two friends talking and seeing where it leads, and hopefully they've got some golden nuggets that they can take into their own lives from different parts of the world.
Yeah, incredible. So good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye.
No, drop my mic. I'm definitely going to keep that in.
Love it. Mic drop. Boom.
Yeah. You have to switch over to YouTube if you want to see how funny that was. Okay, we're really signing off. Bye.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
Thank you so much for joining us on Wellbeing with Manny in Conversation With, and thank you for being part of our community. It really is all for you. It's all purpose driven, and I really hope that you've got something from the episode today. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to share it with anyone who you feel would benefit from hearing these open and real conversations. Please make sure that you are following and you are subscribed to make sure you never miss an episode, either on your app of choice or on YouTube. And if you can, please rate and review the channel. That would be so helpful, because it helps other people find us. And finally, just remember that it is all about talking. It is all about sharing. So think, reach out. Who will you have a conversation with? Have a fabulous week. See you next week.